I always did have a passion for food, for sure. When I was in high school, I would come home and watch food TV because I wasn't, there wasn't anything on. But then I got into the point where I was planning my day around food TV. We grew up in the suburbs of Boulder and weren't all that interested in agriculture, but we had a little garden and some fruit trees. I've got our two brothers, and then my middle brother has a really fantastic garden and honeybees and chickens. Sometimes he has ducks as well, and then fruit trees in his yard. He's got like a quarter-acre yard, and it's all full of plants. My youngest brother actually went into commercial farming, and so he's farming the big commodity crops as well as cattle. He has sheep and chickens and goats kind of as pet projects too. It's been interesting that all three of us are really interested in agriculture and food. Something that I was interested in early on. And then came to Baylor and didn't really figure out how that fit into university studies and couldn't quite figure out what to do. Kind of settled on history, partly because it was a relatively easy way to get out of college. I was a sophomore, so I hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to do. Thought I might have wanted to do something in the sciences, and I really enjoyed my science classes, but really there wasn't anything I wanted to do necessarily with science down the road, except maybe teach. A friend of mine said, "Oh, you should think about becoming a teacher," and so I thought, okay, well, what do I want to teach? I was like, well, I could teach science or history, and then I realized, I could graduate with history easier, and then it's real easy to get science added on. I ended up taking the test, so I was certified to teach science and history pretty quickly after I graduated. But then I'd never really felt like it was a jump to get into food to do this, because I studied history, but really it was about social studies and the movements and things like that. Really coming to the farm, was first hired on as the education director, so obviously that made sense that I was a teacher and saw myself as a teacher at the farm, just in a non-traditional setting, which I never really fit well into the traditional school setting anyway. And so it was great that I could be a teacher, but didn't have to be inside all the time. Through the farm, we do a lot of teaching about community development. I get to teach things like history of agriculture and history of community development and history of social movement, things for both our interns and the other groups that come through the farm. And now, as the executive director, I do more administrative tasks, but I still see myself primarily as an educator. And I think I've most enjoyed just the opportunity to learn everything from theology to agriculture, community development, and then obviously all the people. We've had thousands of fantastic people that have come through our lives. I spent a lot of time educating my staff, educating our board, educating our donors. To me, educating people on how we got here and how it all works together in terms of what we can do to make a more sustainable diet for all of us is really kind of the synthesis of all of what I'm trying to do. There really isn't one typical day, but normally my days are filled with a variety of email checking, working on either budgeting or cash flow projecting, or looking over financial reports and making sure they're correct, or making sure that I can explain them to our board, or preparing for meetings, whether that's with my own board or the variety of coalitions and groups that I'm a part of in town. And then also meeting with teams here on the farm, whether that's the staff team or the different livestock or produce or food system teams that make up the farm. And then I get to spend a reasonable amount of time with people, either giving tours or talking about the farm, going to town to speak to clubs or churches or whatever else will listen to me. Our goal isn't necessarily to grow. There's a lot of emphasis on growth in kind of our American, maybe capitalist kind of ideas of what is success. And we're definitely motivated by kind of this small is beautiful concept where we really don't mind being small, kind of like being small because we can focus on people, we can focus on, we can be flexible. Large organizations have a harder time being flexible and innovative and really responding to community needs. That being said, I think that there will be some growth that happens in terms of the raw numbers of probably add a few interns or maybe even a significant number of interns. We really like where we're at right now. There's kind of social theory that says an ideal group size is around 9 people, and we have 9 interns, so we may add a few. And then, but we still like kind of being in a smaller group setting like that. If we get too much bigger, then we're going to have to kind of set up little teams that that feel like they work together and have people where everybody really understands and knows each other. We've started the Veggie Van project, and so right now we're at 2 stops, and that will be something we definitely will grow. I imagine 3 to 5 years from now we'll probably be at 20 different locations around town, for an hour or two. At a church in East Waco and a senior apartment complex in North Waco. But even just in the next 3 or 4 months, we'll be adding probably 4 or so locations. We've got quite a few that we're working on setting up all the legal framework that will allow us to be there. We also are planning on kind of deepening our training in terms of, I think we've got a pretty good, solid curriculum, but we're always trying to improve that. And then in terms of our facilities, just making sure that we really have what we need in place. One thing we're working on is adding a commercial kitchen. Our kitchen right now is a pretty good little kitchen, but it's not to the point where it can be certified commercial. And so we're going to do the things that we need to do to make it a commercial kitchen, which will allow us to sell jams and jellies and salads and other prepared foods, even do meals, which we aren't exactly sure what that's going to lead to, but we do feel like there's a lot of these opportunities that are presenting themselves, and we really haven't had the ability to explore them. And so now we will be able to do that. For myself, I came into this organization as a volunteer, and 4 out of the 5 staff members that I've got on staff came into the organization as volunteers. Also, I think all the staff people that have worked for me since I've either in my role as education director, associate director, executive director, most of them, or if not all of them, have come back and volunteered at the farm. And so, but I think people come to an organization like this and want to stick around an organization like this because of what they're learning and how they are growing, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and growing in leadership skills. And so my philosophy is basically giving people opportunities to grow and improve their skills so that they can then kind of pass that on to other people. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do with our interns is we get them here. We've got 12, 13 months with them. And so after that 13 months of training on the farm, they're working for other organizations around the world and hopefully sharing and growing people there and creating a multiplier effect to our work. The main thing that I'm really about is taking care of people well, so exhibiting hospitality in the best ways that I can figure out, and then the other side of that is shepherding people well, especially with nonprofits these days, but really about everything with our lives. There's a lot of motivation for metrics and measurement, and some of that's really great. I think it's really important for us to think through what are the long-term implications of what we're doing. Are we just feeding somebody one day and really making things worse in the long run, or are we really working and putting our energy into solutions that improve the world in the long term? So we've got partners in El Salvador, Haiti, Liberia. The woman called up and said, hey, we're going to Zambia. I want to figure out if you guys want to come with us or if we can work together in Zambia. And so we're always kind of got a foot in each world, and we've got our Nicaragua house here. And we always go back and forth. Are we doing this as a way to kind of demonstrate what can be done internationally, or are we trying to demonstrate what is a productive way to do things in the United States? And I think there are some differences in technique, some technologies that make sense in the U.S. that don't make sense internationally. Tractors are going to be available in the U.S. Certain parts of the developing world, they're not going to be accessible, or if people are able to get a hold of them, they're not necessarily going to be able to have the implements or the people around that can repair them, or really even the knowledge of how to use them. But a lot of the basics of the principles of agriculture stay the same. For us, the big ones that we've seen make a difference, no matter what part of the world you're working on, are improving the amount of carbon in the soil, things like crop rotations to manage diseases and pests, moving the livestock to where their food is as opposed to moving the food to where the livestock are makes a difference in the health of the animals and the health of the land. There's a process called rotational grazing that we use that does that. And it's also called management-intensive grazing, but moving the animals to where the best food is and allowing the animals to work in with the natural cycles that God created. So those things are fairly universal. How you go about doing that varies. In the U.S., it makes sense to set up electric fence. In Zambia, it may make sense to hire a 12-year-old boy to be a shepherd and move the animals that way, where in the U.S. it'd be hard to probably convince anybody to be a shepherd, even though it may actually make economic sense. But there's a lot of there's technological issues, and then there's cultural issues with both environments. And so I think that's one thing that's important. We've seen a lot of solutions to developing world problems come up with folks that are Americans that haven't really been worked out in a context where they really understand the sociology of why people are cooking the way they're doing or why they're farming the way they're doing, and without taking in those social factors that you can make a bunch of mistakes. And that's true in the United States. A lot of farmers farm as much to impress their friends as they do to make money. And some of their decisions are motivated by impressing their friends and not being the weirdo at the sale barn. We buy all our coffee fair trade. We make sure that our t-shirts are sewn in a way that benefits everybody involved as much as possible. I was thinking about all the t-shirts that are purchased every year, the difference it would make if all of them were purchased in a way that they benefited the seamstresses who sew them up for us. Each person's going to kind of decide what are the things that are most important to them, but there's a lot of decisions to make, especially around animal agriculture and what farming systems create the healthiest animals, the healthiest land, the healthiest workers. And so we're working hard to raise our animals in the best way we know how. I think ultimately success for me is just our founder the other day was talking to me, and he said, I see the farm being successful, and the reason I feel like it's successful is, we just did the next thing God called us to do. That's all I've been able to figure out, is if I can somehow discern what God is calling me to do, but kind of discerning what God's call is and taking the next step on that. That's all I can do.